BeQuiet is known for making PC components that are exactly what their name implies, quiet. They are a premium brand of power supplies, fans, water and air cooling components, and PC cases, just like this PureBase 500DX here. Let's check it out. Hello and welcome to Danny's Tech Channel. I'm Danny, and if you've never been here before, I like to frequently do hardware reviews, PC builds, and sometimes I do how-to videos on the channel too. Today I want to take a look at the PureBase 500DX from BeQuiet. I'm going to do a full walk around of this thing. I'll give you my positive and negative build notes on this. I did some temperature testing on it as well, and then I'll wrap it up with my final thoughts on this case. The 500DX is an ATX case designed for high airflow and high performance cooling. It comes with 3 PureWings 2 140mm fans. It has a mesh front panel, tempered glass, and RGB lighting. What more could you want? It comes in 2 variants, a black one for $99 or a white one for $157.95. That's the only price I've been able to find for it. Actually, I can't even find these on Newegg right now. I've only found them on Amazon. So if you want this case, I'll leave an affiliate link below. It doesn't cost you anything extra. It just helps out the channel and lets me continue making content for you. Let's perform this quick but thorough walk around. I'll start with the view window side. This has tempered glass, which is held on by 4 thumb screws. It can fit ATX, micro ATX, or ITX motherboards. It's got a 140mm fan at the rear, one at the top, and one installed at the front. These are all pre-installed. The bottom power supply shroud has a triangle cut mesh on it to allow airflow to come through. There is 3 bottom pass-throughs, 1 long channel on the side, and 2 top pass-throughs. Now, all the pass-throughs are beveled smooth so they won't mess up your cables when you feed them through. Moving on to the front of the case, it has a quick removable front panel with a magnetic dust filter that swings out and an RGB connection pad so you don't have to have any cables connect to the panel when you release it. Now, I say quick removable front panel. It's actually very, very tight to get this thing to unsnap, as you can see in the video, but it will come off if you apply enough force to it, and it's supposed to come off. As far as front fan support, it has space for 2 140mm fans, and 1 is pre-installed, as I said, or it has space for 3 120mm fans. As far as radiator support, it can support up to a 280mm or a 360mm radiator. It has a grooved section in the front here, so you can actually fit your fans on the front of it or on the back side of it. If you want to fit 3 120mm fans on the back side of this, you'll have to slide your hard drive tray at the bottom back so that you can fit those fans. The rear panel is removed by 2 thumb screws, and then you just pull it back towards the back of the case and it pops off completely. Moving on to the cable management side, it has a removable SSD and cable pass-through. It has 4 pre-installed Velcro straps down the middle, a removable SSD tray on the motherboard pass-through, a 2-position drive mount cage, or you can remove it completely altogether if you don't need it. This allows for radiator clearance, but it takes away from the power supply cable storage area. And there's plenty of cable tie-down points as well. Taking a look at the top of the case, it has the I/O mounted on top, and it's connected to the case, not the front panel, which is really a nice feature. The top I/O is comprised of the USB 3.1 Type-C, a USB 3.0 port, power button, the front microphone and headphone jacks, which are separate, and the lighting selection button, in case you don't have a connection for your motherboard to be able to control the RGB lights on the case. The top also has a nice RGB strip along the glass that shines down onto your components. It has a magnetic dust filter on the top as well that's easily removable. The top can hold 2 140mm fans, and as I said, there's a 140mm pre-installed, or it can hold 2 120mm fans. It can support up to a 240mm radiator in the top. If you try to put a 280mm radiator up top, it won't fit. At least it didn't fit for me because it was hitting the motherboard heat sinks. Sorry, but I just wanted to let you know. Didn't work for me, probably won't work for you. The bottom of the case has a slide out air filter as well, and it removes from the front. Lastly, the rear of the case has room for a 120mm or a 140mm fan for exhaust. The 140mm is already pre-installed, so I would just go with that. There's a slide cover on the PCI slots, and the PCI slots are reinstallable, by the way. At the bottom where the power supply is, you have a mounting bracket with thumb screws so that you can take that off, install it onto your power supply, and then slide the whole thing in and not have to use a screwdriver while you're trying to put your power supply in there. That's it for the walk around of the case. Let's talk about the build notes. I'm going to give you some positives and negatives that I ran into while I was building in this case. First thing I liked is the case is actually really wide. It's wider than most ATX cases that I have. This case can fit up to 190 millimeter CPU cooler in height. Another thing that I liked about the case is the fact that it has a button to control your RGB lighting in case your motherboard doesn't have that feature. Because the connection that it gives you is a 5-volt addressable RGB connector. It looks like a 4-pin connector, but it's actually 3 pins. You have to have that plug on your motherboard to be able to control the lighting through software. So if you don't have that, BeQuiet gives you the button to be able to scroll through some predetermined lighting features and colors and stuff like that they give you. But having the button and the 5-volt addressable RGB header gives you 2 options to be able to control your lighting rather than just a button by itself or just the cable. It's nice to have choices. I also really like the amount of cable management space you have in this case. If you're a new builder or have not built a lot of PCs in the past, so you're not real good at cable management, this is a great case for you because the amount of space you have from the motherboard tray to the back of the case is huge. I'd say it's about 1.5 inches. It's just really nice having the extra space. And as I said, there's a ton of cable tie locations. So you have a lot of options when it comes to managing your cables. Don't worry about how bad my cables look. I didn't take my time. Building in the case is very easy. It gives you a lot of ability to be able to remove panels and stuff. The cable routing and SSD mount pass-through that you can take out of there gives you a lot of space to be able to maneuver through. And then you can take that motherboard cutout SSD mount as well. You could take that off and access everything. So before I even put the motherboard in, I moved my fans around and I was able to reach my hand through the back of the case to be able to hold my fan in place to screw it in and everything. So it was kind of neat. It almost felt like a modular case when I was building in it. The last thing I really like is the front panel. Even though it is a pain to take that thing off to be able to get it to release, taking it off and not having any of the cables connected to it or anything makes it very easy to build with. It's just continuing my talk about how easy it is to build in because you have so much space and everything's removable. Now, I can't talk about all these positives without giving a little bit of negatives. I've already talked about this first negative, the front panel. While I love that it doesn't connect to anything and it just quick releases off, it is a pain to get off of there. I mean, it just does not want to let go until you really yank on that thing. Second thing that I thought was a little bit of a problem for me is there's no fan controller. When you have this many choices of fans, it's just kind of nice to have an additional fan controller in here. Maybe like an RGB hub in the back to connect more fans to. If I want to do an RGB fan in it or something like that. People love RGB these days. Just something I would have liked to see. This is my biggest gripe about the case, and it's definitely the largest negative aspect of it. The cable pass-through has your SSD mounting plate on it. There's a thumb screw that you can remove, and then it just swings back and comes off the case. I guess you could theoretically leave it out of the case, and that gives you better cable management. As you can see right here from my cable management, I had to do a hard 180-degree turn. I mean, I came in and I made that heavy loop. The custom braided cables have to be trained, so they have a tough time making that hard of a bend. I think it's just a little bit too close to the motherboard to be able to make that angle. And the last thing, I guess it's just my case in general that had this issue, but when you go to remove this top dust filter, I have one of the little magnets that goes in the corner here, and it loves to stay inside the case by itself when I try to remove this filter. I don't know if they were glued in or pressed in from the factory. Mine's just defective. It's really not that big of a deal, but it is a negative on the case. Let's take a look at temperature testing, because I was actually pretty impressed with this for how quiet the case is. Oh, real quick, I didn't even talk about that in my positives. The case is silent. I didn't do any kind of audio testing where I held the microphone up to it or anything, but trust me, you can't hear it when you're gaming. These fans, because they're so big, I think that's what they did. The 140 millimeter fans don't have to spin as much to get airflow going. So it's just quiet. They did a good job at keeping it quiet, but keeping the thermals pretty low. Let's take a look at that now. I did 2 different tests. I did Cinebench R23 and I did Unigen Heaven to test the GPU. I did a 10-minute stress test on both items, and these are the results. In the Cinebench R23, at idle, the CPU was running at 25 Celsius. But during load, under 100% load for the CPU in Cinebench, it got up to 78C. Now that's a little bit more toasty than I like to see, but I totally understand. I didn't do any kind of settings of the fan profiles or anything in the BIOS, so this is just what it runs out of the box on its own. Now I was more impressed with Unigine Heaven. Unigine Heaven's benchmark run, with the system sitting idle, the GPU sits at 28 Celsius. When I ran up Unigine Heaven and did the 10-minute stress test on the GPU, it ran at 72 Celsius. Oh, and if you're wondering about the components in this, it's an i9-10850K with an RTX 2080 Ti. I didn't mention that because I'm doing a totally separate video using this build and doing a bunch of testing and everything like that. So if you're interested in a more in-depth look at this build and the components that are in it, make sure you subscribe down below and come back for that content next week. Well, that's all I got for the BeQuiet PureBase 500DX case review. Actually, I'll give you a couple final thoughts on this that I did while building, and this is just my last minute notes. First recommendation I have, if you're gonna build in this case, do all your plugs at the top before you mount a radiator on here. I didn't plug in my EPS connector or any of my fan connectors or anything up top on the motherboard, and I regretted it because I had to undo the radiator, let it swing down, plug everything else in, and then put it back up. Novice mistake, I know. Second thing I recommend to you is do what I did with the case configuration of the fans. Move the top fan to the front and put your radiator up top. If you put your radiator in the front, it's just gonna block a lot of your airflow coming in to cool your GPU. So this is the ideal way I would say to put it. Obviously all the heat inside the case is coming up through the radiator, and that's gonna make your CPU a little bit hotter, but generally the GPU runs hotter than the CPU anyways, so that's why I did it this way. And lastly, the amount of airflow that you get out of this, even though it's super quiet, is really nice. I mean, BeQuiet has a great balance between performance and silence in this 500DX they've built. And if you have any more questions about the case or the build, swing on over to our Discord. I'll leave a link down in the description below if you want to check it out. We have tech chats, gaming discussions, and you can even stop by and catch me gaming sometimes. And as I always say, I'm Danny with Danny's Tech Channel, and I'll see you in the next video.
We're moving close together.